In 1983, corporations were selling candy underwear to 13-year-olds, and somehow it was totally normal. And this lady, she knew. She could smell the orange Julius on my breath and the absolute $0 in my pocket.
Get out.
But 2 hours ago, I was the richest kid in Federal Way. This is how I lost everything in a 1983 mall wonderland designed to trap me. Saturday, March 12th, 1983, 11 a.m., SeaTac Mall, Federal Way, Washington. My dad just pulled up to the curb in front of the mall. He pulls out his wallet and hands me and each of my two sisters a $20 bill. Then he gives us a single instruction. Meet me out front here at 6 o'clock. Please don't be late and have fun. I'm 13 years old. I have 7 hours of freedom. I have a small fortune in my pocket, and I'm standing at the gates of a magical wonderland of possibilities. What could possibly go wrong?
Now there's a good reason the people come back to SeaTac Mall.
Cut to 2:30 p.m. I've been here for 3.5 hours, and I have exactly $0 left. So with nowhere else to go, I go where every kid goes when they visit the mall, Spencer's. So I start walking down the aisle and try to look busy. But you gotta realize, this place was insane. I don't even know why this was allowed in the mall. Everything about this place was wrong, but it was like the peak of sophisticated comedy for a 7th grader. They would have like Frankie Says Relax t-shirts, female body inspector pins, whoopee cushions, fake dog poop, and then when you went further back into the store, they had an adults only section. Beer helmets, and you'd see fundies, and it was the underwear built for two. We'd stared at the box trying to figure out the logistics. It kind of seemed like a safety hazard. Then next to that, you'd have Sweet Cheeks edible underwear. This was basically a fruit roll-up shaped into a bikini bottom.
Nice.
They even had candy necklace G-strings. It was all wrong, but awesome at the same time. Then after that, you'd walk past this invisible line where the store got dark. It was pitch black, but then it had black lights, so you could just see glowing neon everything. So from far away, you'd see the bright neon lava lamps and those plasma balls with the lightning inside. Once you reached that part of the store, you felt like you were in a basement you weren't old enough to be in. It reminded me of my friends' older brothers. They would all have black light posters and black lights in their rooms. And for some reason, they all loved saltwater fish tanks. I'm not saying that everyone who has a saltwater fish tank was a stoner, but in my neighborhood, they were. Then you'd reach the poster rack. This was a good 15 minutes experience for sure. You flipped fast through the bands you didn't care about, but then if you saw some skin or like a bikini photo, you'd pause. But you always had to keep one eye on the poster and one eye on the clerk to make sure she wasn't back there while you were looking at these posters. And for some weird reason, there was like 40 different Iron Maiden posters. Like they vastly overestimated the heavy metal market in my area. Then you'd reach the gold, like that one famous picture of the tennis player scratching her butt. This was considered fine art for a 13-year-old in 1983. Then there were always posters of ladies in pink bikinis washing Corvettes or just bending over for no reason in particular. We didn't buy these. I'm not even sure if we were allowed to or not. I never tried. My guess is we probably were allowed to because it was the 80s and it was weird. But my guess is my dad wouldn't be too jazzed if I bought these posters and put them up in my bedroom. I'm not sure. It just was awkward either way, so I never bought one of these. Anyway, I've overstayed my welcome in Spencer's, so it was time to leave the store.
Get out.
So how did I run out of money so quickly? Let's rewind back to 11:05 a.m., the exact moment the money touched my hand. So my older sister, she jumps out of the car and darts into the mall and doesn't want to be seen with us. I think she's meeting her friends. She's a little bit older and cooler than we are at this point. So I look at my little sister and I'm like, hey, let's go see a movie. And the movie theaters in 1983 were not as organized as they are now. It was kind of a free-for-all. They would have employees just one person to rip your ticket. Then there maybe be like two behind the snack counter. And then really nobody to be seen in the rest of the theater unless they were like cleaning a theater. But they really didn't care. You would have rated R movies next to G-rated movies, and they were all close together, and there's no assigned seats. And I swear, you could be a toddler and buy tickets to watch Pete's Dragon and then just waddle your way into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Alien, and then no one would stop you. So choices today for movies: Scarface, Risky Business, Return of the Jedi, and War Games. And you have to remember, back then the movie stayed in the theaters forever. So Return of the Jedi had been playing for 6 months, but it was still on 3 different screens. But we'd already seen that. So we decided on War Games. The problem? It doesn't start till 12:30, so we have an hour and a half to kill. My little sister, she probably wants to look at conditioner or go into some girly store or something. So I don't want any part of that. So I tell my little sister, hey, Susie, why don't you meet me back here at noon, and then we can get something to eat, and then we'll go into the movie theaters. Because I'm a 13-year-old boy, I have one priority today over everything else: the Goldmine Arcade. The Goldmine Arcade was located at the far end of the mall. I was excited to go there, but I had a small problem. I had a $20 bill and I couldn't use the change machine because I don't want to get $20 in quarters. I mean, I did want to have $20 in quarters, but I needed money for the movie and for lunch. This meant one thing: I had to interact with the change guy. Arcade change guys came in 2 distinct species. Species A, the 19-year-old with feathered hair and an attitude problem. Species B, the creepy 40-year-old with a beer gut, Jeffrey Dahmer glasses, and a pervy mustache. If memory serves me correctly, the change guys wore the black and white referee shirt, and these are the same uniforms that were worn by guys working at roller skating rinks. And I'm convinced they were hired by the same union or something like that, because they all hated children. I'm not sure what the deal was, but these people did not like to interact with children. They were the worst possible people for this job. It was crazy. And they all had that silver coin belt. It was a metal dispenser on their waist, and they'd press a lever that would like make a sound, like clacking sound, and then quarters would shoot out into their hand. It was kind of awesome. So I walk into the back of the gold mine trying to find the change guy, and he's the angry teenager version today, and he's slamming the side of a KISS pinball machine and swearing. I stand quietly next to the pinball machine and say, I need change. He sighs like I just asked him to donate a kidney. He snatches the 20 out of my hand, snaps off 3 5s, 4 1s, and 4 quarters. Then he does that thing where he jerks his head back to get the feathered hair bangs out of his face, gives me a scowl, and goes back to the pinball machine. All right, now I have some quarters. I hit my game rotation. These are games that I'm good at: Robotron, Joust, Track and Field, Dig Dug, Elevator Action, games like that. The game that I stay away from, or try to stay away from, is Defender, because I suck at it. And I stay away from the game Sinistar because that game was terrifying. They had the volume cranked up so high you could hear it in the parking lot.
Run, coward.
So I'm in the arcade, I'm having a good time, and I'm trying to budget. I really tried to budget today. Like, I really did. But then I saw Dragon's Lair. And this was 50 cents a game, which is basically extortion. That's like $1.75 today. But I couldn't look away. I put in $1, and then another $1, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. I'd burned through $13 and I'd $7 to my name. Zero self-control. Noon hits, I meet my sister, it's lunchtime. We typically didn't head to the food court because our mall had an Orange Julius, and those drinks were delicious. But it was funny because the drinks were like $1.50, and for 25 cents extra, they'd crack a raw egg and blend it up into it. I think it's maybe because of the movie Rocky. I remember he chugged like 8 eggs and then went jogging. That's not a good idea, right? And I don't know why we thought drinking raw poultry at the mall was a good idea, but people did it. I did not. I skipped the egg. I got a chili dog, I got my Orange Julius, and then afterwards I got the movie ticket, and now I'm broke. Now we get into the theater for War Games. The theaters were so much different back then. The floor was barely slanted. Like, kids today are spoiled with stadium seating where everyone can see. But in 1983, the floor was barely slanted. It was a gentle ramp. Now, I understand why they did this, because if someone was in a wheelchair, they wouldn't lose control, or they could wheel their way back up and out of the theater. But if you were a kid back then, anyone taller than like 5'8", 5'9", if they sat in front of you, the movie was over. Remember, this is the 80s, so you're staring at the back of a perm for 2 hours. We got lucky this time. Nobody sat in front of us. But I do have to mention the smell of theaters back then. They had a very specific scent profile that was not pleasant whatsoever. It was a mixture of stale popcorn, bad breath, a sticky floor, and farts. You're just trapped in this hot, musty room with no ventilation. And I'm like, why isn't anybody else noticing this? It was just nasty. I thought maybe that was just the price to watch a movie. Like when you watch a movie, you're just going to have to deal with some toxic gas. That's going to be a thing. But I just don't know why that wasn't conquered earlier. I mean, they obviously did take care of it because we don't have that problem now, but it took decades. Like I had 20 years of dealing with really nasty theater smells before they figured that out. So after the movie, I went to Spencer's, but I'm done talking about Spencer's. So right now it's 3 o'clock. I'm broke, I'm bored, and suddenly I feel like I'm too cool for this mall. Like I thought I was really cool and cooler than a lot of other people, but I was an introvert, so it was just kind of a funny combination. And I listened to bands like The Cure, New Order, Joy Division, The Clash, Dead Kennedys, things like that. And so I kind of felt like a little bit out of place when I was in the mall. But since I had time to burn, I decided to judge the normies at the Squire shop. SeaTac Mall had 2 main clothing stores for teenagers, Mr. Rags and the Squire shop. And the hiring requirements were strict. To work here, you needed one thing, the butt cut. For those who don't know what the butt cut is, it's what me and my friends called the haircut, where guys parted their hair down the middle to where it looked like a butt. You had the standard butt, which was straight down the middle, usually kind of like almost like a bowl cut. And then you had the feathered butt, where it had wings like a bird. It was still a butt, but then it kind of winged out, feathered. I'm 100% convinced that this hairstyle was in the employee handbook for both the Squire shop as well as Mr. Rags. When you walked into these stores, it would always be the same sort of music, and it was cranked. It would be like Loverboy Working for the Weekend, or Sister Christian by Night Ranger, or that horrible song by Billy Squire. I think it was either Stroke Me or Stroke Man, and it would be like, stroke me, stroke, stroke. I think it's called Stroke Me, or I don't know. Anyways, that song's playing. You get the picture. So I'd walk in, Stroke Man is cranking, and I'd see a guy with a feathered butt cut giving me attitude because he knew I didn't have any money, and I'd last about 3 minutes. Well, he was right. I was gone quickly. Next stop, the bookstores. We had 2 bookstores, a Walden Books and a B. Dalton. I'd kind of hop between the two, or I'd start at one and end in the next. I'd start at the magazine rack. First, the video game magazines. I try to memorize the patterns for Dragon's Lair so I wouldn't lose 50 cents in 10 seconds time, like I lost earlier in the day. Then I drift to the men's interest section, quote unquote. I wasn't bold enough to grab a Playboy because that took guts. So I grabbed like something like Easy Rider, which was not quite as obvious. It was a little further down the rack, easier to grab without being blatant about it. So you had to use a tactical lean. You'd face your body away from the clerk so that you couldn't see what you were reading. The women were kind of pretty, but they were harsh. They looked like backup dancers in a Motley Crue video. Lots of leather bikinis, lots of hairspray, and they definitely looked like they'd stab you if you touched their Harley. I'd read until the clerk shouted, "Hey, this isn't a library. Buy it or get out."
Library.
And that was my cue to leave, and I'd go do the exact same thing at Walden Books. Now it's 4 p.m. I decided to go to the record store. I was obsessed with album art. I really miss record art. I'd spend an hour just flipping through the bins. But here's a tragedy of vinyl. You would pay like $8.99 for an album because you liked one of the songs you heard on the radio, only to get home and realize that the other 9 songs were absolute trash. There was no preview button in 1983. It was a gamble. And this record store was surprisingly good. They had a big import section, and then the people working there were really knowledgeable about the records, and they were kind of artsy and stuff for a suburban mall. So I'd spend a long time in there. Now it's 5 p.m. I'm done with the record store. 1 hour to go. I'm dying of thirst, so I head to the water fountain. Now, mall water fountains were a game of Russian roulette back then. Sometimes you got a nice strong stream, but usually it was barely a dribble. You'd have to play chicken with the nozzle. You had to get your mouth dangerously close to the metal without touching it. And right next to the fountain, the ashtray pillar. Every mall had them. They looked like concrete pillars filled with cat litter and cigarette butts. And for some reason, people use these as gum disposals. So you're drinking lukewarm water, trying not to get a canker sore, you're smelling Camel cigarettes and staring at a piece of off-yellow spearmint gum that someone spit into the cat litter. I can literally smell this memory right now. My throat's closing up. Finally, I go to the seating area just to sit down. And there they are, my 2 sisters. We don't even say anything. We just give each other a look. The nod. We are done. So my older sister walks over to the payphone area and makes a collect call to my dad. Dad, can you pick us up? We then walk out to the curb. My dad rolls up 15 minutes later in his car, and that is it. I probably repeated versions of this day over 100 times back then, and honestly, I feel bad for kids today. They have iPhones, they have the internet, but they don't have the freedom of being 13 years old, unsupervised, broke, and bored in a shopping mall. On paper, it sounds terrible, but honestly, it was the best time ever.